I stood in the middle of my dining room, holding a strand of Christmas lights that had somehow tied itself into a cruel knot, the kind only a patient saint or a desperate man would dare to untangle. I was neither of those things, just a father who had spent too many years putting business ahead of family and now was trying, perhaps too late, to put things right. A year ago, I wouldn't have been doing any of this myself. I would have hired a decorator, maybe even booked a five-star restaurant, something elegant and effortless. But this year, I needed something different. This year, I needed home. The smell of pine needles from the tree I'd dragged in that morning lingered in the air, mixing with the faint trace of cinnamon from the candles I'd bought at the market. The dining table was bare for now, but I could already picture it dressed in white linen, shimmering under soft light, with the good china my late mother had given me for my wedding, the same china I hadn't dared to use in over a decade. I wanted warmth. I wanted the laughter of my children bouncing off the walls, the soft hum of music under it all, the feeling that for one night, even one brief evening, we could pretend we hadn't drifted apart. The truth was, I had missed too much. My daughter Emily had gotten married 2 years ago. I'd been there, of course, sitting in the front row wearing a tailored suit and a proud smile, but I remember feeling like a guest in her life, not her father. Her husband, James, was polite but distant, and I hadn't seen them more than a handful of times since the wedding. My son Michael, well, Michael was still trying to figure life out, bouncing between jobs and hobbies, never staying anywhere long enough to plant roots. He was 24 now, independent, but in a way that felt more like avoidance than maturity. And me? I was 55, divorced for 7 years, living alone in a house that had once been loud and chaotic and warm, but had grown silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. For years, I had convinced myself it was fine. I poured my energy into work, convinced that financial success could make up for everything else. That's how I justified the missed dinners, the birthdays I sent gifts to instead of attending, the endless, "I'll make it up to you" promises that turned into nothing. But something about this year had been different. Maybe it was the way time had suddenly started moving faster. Maybe it was the quiet loneliness I felt each morning when I drank coffee by myself, staring at an empty chair where my wife used to sit. Or maybe it was seeing my reflection one morning and realizing I had gray in my beard and a hollowness in my eyes that wasn't there before. Whatever it was, it pushed me into action. I decided I would host Christmas dinner, no excuses, no shortcuts, no assistance. Just me, the house, and my family. I started planning weeks ahead. The menu was handwritten in my old leather notebook, filled with crossed-out lines and arrows. I bought a prime rib roast big enough for 12 people, a turkey for good measure, and all the trimmings: Brussels sprouts, mashed potatoes, fresh rolls, sweet potatoes, Emily's favorite, and the ingredients for a homemade cranberry sauce because Michael once said store-bought tasted like red Jell-O from a can. I even found myself doing something I hadn't done in decades: baking cookies. I remembered when Emily and Michael were kids, we used to make sugar cookies together on Christmas Eve, letting them decorate with way too much frosting and sprinkles. They'd end up looking ridiculous one year. Michael made a snowman with one eye, and a purple scarf made from candy. But those were the kind of memories that stuck. I wanted that back, even if I had to do it alone this time. The decorations took an entire weekend. I climbed up into the attic and brought down every dusty box of ornaments and lights I could find. Some of the ornaments still had the kids' names written in black marker, the handwriting crooked because they were too young to write properly back then. There was one ornament, a small ceramic house Emily had painted in kindergarten, that nearly broke me when I found it. I stared at it for a long time, thumb brushing the rough surface, before hanging it front and center on the tree. When I called Emily to tell her about the dinner, she sounded surprised. "Dad, Christmas Eve is complicated for us this year. James's parents wanted us to—" "Bring them," I said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "Bring James's parents, your in-laws, anyone you want. I just want everyone together. We'll make it work." She hesitated, then finally said, "Okay, Dad, we'll be there." Michael's response was less enthusiastic. "Yeah, sure, whatever. I'll come. Can I bring a +1? "Of course," I said, even though I had no idea who that might be. He didn't offer details, and I didn't ask. That had become our rhythm surface conversations, nothing too deep. By Christmas Eve morning, I was exhausted but happy. The house looked alive again. The tree glowed in the corner, gifts stacked neatly beneath it. The table was already set with linen napkins and silverware I had polished the night before, while Bing Crosby sang softly from the speakers. For a moment, I closed my eyes and imagined it all. Emily laughing, Michael cracking some inappropriate joke, James's parents feeling welcome, Diane raising a toast to family. It had been so long since I'd felt that. I stepped outside onto the porch, cradling a small glass of wine in one hand. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, dusting the driveway and the mailbox wrapped in a giant red ribbon like we used to do when the kids were little. The neighborhood looked like something out of a Christmas card, lights twinkling from every roof, the sound of children playing in the distance, and the faint smell of wood smoke hanging in the air. For the first time in years, I felt hope. I lifted the glass toward the cold night sky and whispered, "To second chances." I didn't know then that second chances don't always look like you expect them to. Sometimes, no matter how carefully you plan, Christmas dinner can turn cold before the turkey even hits the table. By 5 o'clock, the house smelled exactly as I hoped it would. Rich, warm, filled with butter and garlic and roasted meat. The kind of smell that could drag anyone back into their childhood. I'd lit every candle, turned on every string of lights, and even set out the crystal glasses I had been saving for special occasions. A phrase that had always seemed laughable until this moment. Tonight was supposed to be special. I put on a dark green sweater one Emily had bought me 2 Christmases ago, and checked the dining table one last time. 12 seats, perfectly aligned, napkins folded neatly, silverware shining. I actually smiled at my own reflection in the glass of the china cabinet. For once, I felt like I wasn't just running a company or signing checks. I felt like a father trying to put something broken back together. The doorbell rang. Emily arrived first, her coat draped elegantly over her shoulders, her husband James right behind her carrying a bottle of expensive wine. "Dad," she said, smiling, though it looked a little forced. "The house looks... wow. You really went all out." I hugged her and whispered, "I wanted it to feel like old times." James extended his hand. "Robert, thanks for having us." "Of course," I said, shaking it firmly. "Glad you both could make it." They stepped inside, Emily glancing around as if she were walking through a museum of memories she wasn't sure she wanted to revisit. Her eyes paused on the old family photo over the fireplace, one from when she was 16 and Michael was 11, taken on a summer vacation we had in Maine. I saw something flicker across her face, then vanish behind polite composure. "Where's Michael?" I asked. "He said he'd be a little late," Emily replied. "Traffic, probably." We moved into the living room, and soon my sister Diane arrived with her husband, followed by 2 close friends from the firm. Laughter started to fill the space, and for a brief moment, I felt that this might actually work. Then Michael walked in. He wasn't alone. A tall blonde woman with striking red lipstick followed him through the doorway, holding his hand like they'd been together for years. "Dad, this is Sophie," he said casually, as if introducing me to a coworker rather than the person apparently sharing his life. "Nice to meet you, Sophie," I said, offering my hand. "Welcome." She smiled politely, but glanced down at her phone almost immediately, scrolling with her thumb while nodding at my greeting. That was the first crack I noticed. At first, it was subtle. Emily checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. James excused himself to take a quick call, and Sophie seemed more interested in Instagram than in conversation. Even Michael, who used to be the loudest voice at any family dinner, sat half-slouched on the sofa, mumbling responses when people talked to him. I tried to keep things moving. "Who wants wine?" "Emily, remember how you used to love that Bordeaux we opened on Christmas Eve when you were 16? She smiled faintly. "Yeah, Dad, I remember." But her attention flicked back to her buzzing phone almost instantly. I poured glasses anyway, making a toast before we sat down to eat. To family, to Christmas, and to starting fresh. Everyone raised their glasses, some more enthusiastically than others, and for a fleeting moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, things would turn around. But as we began eating, it became clear how much had changed. Conversations were fragmented, small talk about work, shallow commentary about weather and flights and home renovations. No one asked about me, my year, or why I'd chosen to host. Instead, they talked to their screens, or to the person sitting right next to them in hushed voices. I tried telling an old story, one I thought would make them laugh. "Remember when we tried to build that snowman in the front yard, and it collapsed on Michael?" I chuckled, waiting for them to join in. Emily gave a distracted, "Yeah, that was funny," without looking up. James just smiled politely. Michael didn't respond at all. He was showing Sophie something on his phone. It was like being surrounded by ghosts. They were there, in my house, at my table, but the warmth I'd been chasing wasn't. I noticed my sister Diane watching me, her eyes soft with pity. She'd always been the one to tell me I worked too much, that one day I'd wake up and realize I'd traded memories for money. Maybe this was what she meant. I focused on the food, hoping maybe good flavors could fill the silence. I'd spent hours cooking. The prime rib was tender, the turkey golden brown, the sweet potato casserole creamy and perfectly spiced. But nobody seemed to notice. Michael said nice when I offered him seconds, and Emily absent-mindedly picked at her plate while texting under the table. "Everything okay, Em?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She looked up, blinking like she'd forgotten where she was. "Yeah, Dad, fine. Just work stuff." Work stuff. On Christmas Eve. I swallowed a lump in my throat and nodded, pretending it didn't sting. I had built a life that taught my kids exactly this, to prioritize everything but family, just as I once had. And now, sitting there watching them, I wasn't sure who was really to blame. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to refill the wine, lingering a little longer in the kitchen than necessary. I stared out the window at the quiet snowfall, wondering how something so beautiful outside could feel so hollow inside. When I returned, nothing had changed. Sophie was laughing at something on her phone, Michael scrolling through social media, Emily whispering to James. My carefully orchestrated perfect Christmas dinner was slowly becoming a quiet exhibition of disconnection. And yet, I kept smiling. I kept pouring wine, asking questions, forcing myself to believe that maybe the warmth I wanted could still happen if I just tried hard enough. But deep down, I knew something was coming. Something that would finally shatter the fragile illusion I had built around this night. I didn't know it yet, but before the evening was over, one gift, one simple gesture would change everything. Dinner plates were nearly cleared, glasses half empty, and the kind of silence that doesn't belong at a Christmas table had settled over the room. There was no sound of shared laughter, no stories bouncing between family members, only the quiet tapping of phone screens and the occasional clink of cutlery against porcelain. I took a deep breath and stood, trying to inject some energy into the evening. "Okay, everyone," I said, forcing cheer into my voice. "Time for gifts." It was something we used to do when the kids were little, one by one. Each person would give and receive, no rush, no chaos. I thought maybe this could pull us back together, even for just a moment. I reached under the tree and picked up the first package, wrapped in glossy silver paper with Emily's name written in bold black ink. I'd spent days thinking about this gift. It wasn't just a token. It was something I thought would help her and James get ahead, a sizable check tucked neatly into an engraved keepsake box, along with a heartfelt note about believing in her future. I handed it to her, smiling. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Emily peeled the paper back with practiced neatness, lifting the lid and pulling out the check. For a moment, she stared at it, expression unreadable. Then she looked up at me, and I expected gratitude, maybe even a hug. Instead, she said, "Dad, seriously? After everything?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" She held up the check. "You think this makes up for what you did with the Whitestone deal? You cost me and James a fortune when you pulled out of that project. Do you have any idea how much we lost because of your cautious strategy?" The room froze. Diane's fork clinked against her plate, and James shifted uncomfortably beside Emily, whispering, "Emily," as if trying to calm her down. But she kept going, her voice sharper now. "You're always throwing money around like it's some kind of bandage. First you neglect us for years. Now you write checks and expect it to make everything okay. You think we need your charity?" I stood there, stunned, the gift box still in my hands. I had expected warmth, maybe even forgiveness for all the times I hadn't been there. I hadn't expected this. "Emily, No, Dad, you don't get it." She pushed the check back toward me. "This isn't about money. It's about trust. And frankly, I don't trust you when it comes to family or business." Her words sliced deeper than I thought possible. I looked at Michael, hoping for support, but he avoided my eyes, pretending to be deeply fascinated by his phone. Sophie gave me a polite, awkward smile, and then went back to scrolling. I felt my chest tighten, heat crawling up my neck. "Emily," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "that gift wasn't about fixing the past. It was about helping you build your future." She crossed her arms. "We don't need your future. We just need you to stop controlling things like you always do." There it was, that invisible wall I'd been trying to tear down all night, now reinforced with steel. I swallowed hard, turned toward Michael, and reached for the second gift. A small velvet box containing car keys, attached to a note for a reliable, used SUV I'd bought for him, knowing his old car barely ran. I thought it would help him get to work, maybe encourage him to settle somewhere long enough to build stability. I handed it to him, my voice quieter now. "Here, son." I thought you could use this. Michael opened the box, his face lighting up for a brief second. Wow, Dad. A car? Yes, something safe, reliable. Thought you could use it. But then Sophie leaned over his shoulder and whispered something I couldn't hear. Michael chuckled and shrugged. Thanks, but you didn't have to. I was actually planning on leasing a Tesla soon. Guess this'll do for now. For now. The words hung heavy in the air. I felt like I was watching my family slip through my fingers in real time. The more I tried to hold on, the faster they pulled away. All the memories of Christmas mornings when Emily squealed over Barbie dolls and Michael jumped into my arms for giving him a baseball glove gone, replaced by a transactional coldness I didn't recognize. Diane cleared her throat, trying to break the tension. Robert, these are very generous gifts. I think we should all be grateful. But Emily cut in again. Generous or manipulative? It's the same thing he's been doing for years, buying his way out of actually caring. That one hit hard. I stepped back, feeling suddenly out of place in my own living room. My hand went to my pocket, gripping the folded note I had written for Emily earlier, one I'd intended to read aloud, a note about family, forgiveness, and moving forward. But the words now felt ridiculous, naive even. I'm sorry, I muttered, though I wasn't sure who I was apologizing to. Maybe I overstepped. Emily sighed, clearly frustrated, and tossed the check onto the coffee table like it was an unwanted flyer. James looked at me with sympathetic eyes but said nothing. Michael slipped the car keys into his pocket, already scrolling his phone again. I retreated to the kitchen under the pretense of checking on dessert, but really, I just needed air. I braced my hands against the countertop, breathing deeply, staring at my reflection in the dark window. Snow was falling heavier now, blanketing the yard in silence. Out there, the world looked pure, peaceful. In here, I felt like I was standing in a stranger's house. How did it come to this? For years, I had believed that success would make my family proud, that all the long hours and sleepless nights at work would one day pay off in the form of security and gratitude. But somewhere along the way, I'd lost something more valuable than money: connection. I had missed birthdays, recitals, and little moments that probably meant everything to them. I'd used gifts as apologies, vacations as peace offerings. And tonight, I saw clearly what that had built. Distance, resentment, a family that looked at me and saw a wallet, not a father. I gripped the countertop tighter, blinking back an ache in my eyes I hadn't felt in years. When I returned to the living room, no one looked up. Emily was whispering to James, Michael and Sophie were laughing at something on his phone, and Diane gave me that same sad, knowing look she'd given earlier. I sat down slowly, my carefully planned, perfect Christmas dinner unraveling completely. And yet, a strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes when you finally see something for what it is, instead of what you wish it to be. For the rest of the evening, I barely spoke. I let them finish their conversations, let dessert sit mostly untouched, and let the night wind down on its own. There was no yelling, no grand fight, just quiet disappointment. But deep inside, something had shifted. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew this. Tonight would change everything. The night should have ended right after dessert. If this were any normal Christmas Eve, people would have hugged, exchanged warm wishes, and headed home, their arms full of leftovers and hearts full of joy. Instead, we all sat there in uncomfortable silence, surrounded by the faint jingling of the Christmas playlist I'd put on earlier, a playlist that now felt painfully out of place. I tried to rally. Anyone want coffee? Hot cocoa? My voice was too bright, even to my own ears. No one answered right away. Emily finally muttered, "No thanks," her eyes still locked on the folded check she had tossed onto the coffee table earlier, as though it were radioactive. Michael shook his head, too busy scrolling on his phone, and Sophie gave me a polite smile before whispering something to him. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not violently, just a quiet, sharp break, like ice cracking on a frozen pond. I stood up, my hands flat on the table. "All right," I said softly. "We need to talk." Emily looked up, brow furrowed. "About what?" "About this," I said, motioning toward the table, toward all of them. "About tonight. About us." James shifted uncomfortably, but Emily crossed her arms. "Dad, can we not do this right now? It's Christmas." "No," I said, my voice steady now. "That's exactly why we have to do it right now. Because I planned this dinner hoping we could be a family again, even just for one night. And instead, it feels like I invited a group of strangers who would rather be anywhere else but here." Michael put his phone down, finally looking at me. "Dad, you're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I asked, locking eyes with him. Emily just accused me of trying to buy her forgiveness, and you... I turned to him fully. You took keys to a car like it was a free coffee punch card. What happened to us? Emily scoffed. What happened? You happened, Dad. You were never home when we were kids. You were too busy working, chasing every deal, every dollar, and now you want us to pretend like it's all okay because you cooked a turkey and wrote a check? Her words hit hard, sharper because there was some truth in them. I opened my mouth, closed it, then said quietly, I wasn't perfect. I know that. I worked too much. I missed things, but it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I wanted you to have a better life. You mean your version of a better life? Emily shot back. The big house, the cars, the expensive schools. But you were never there, Dad. And now you're trying to control our lives with money the same way you controlled everything else. I stared at her, my daughter, the little girl who used to hold my hand crossing the street, who used to call me her hero. Now, all I saw was resentment in her eyes. Michael spoke next, his voice quieter, but no less cutting. She's not wrong, Dad. I mean, you can't just throw stuff at us and expect everything to be good. You've been absent. And when you are around, it's like you're trying to fix things by paying for them. A lump formed in my throat. I wasn't trying to pay for love, I said, my voice cracking despite my effort to keep it steady. I thought if I gave you everything I didn't have growing up, you'd know how much I cared. Emily shook her head. You don't get it. We didn't need more stuff, Dad. We needed you. Those 3 words, we needed you, hit harder than anything else she'd said. They echoed in my head, each one like a stone thrown into still water, ripples spreading through every memory I'd tried to bury. The late nights at the office, the birthdays I'd missed, the excuses I'd made to myself. They'll understand when they're older. I'm doing this for them. But they hadn't understood. They'd grown up, carried those absences like scars, and now they were showing me every one of them in sharp detail. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The room felt too small, the Christmas lights too bright, the air too heavy. Finally, I took a deep breath. You're right, I said softly. I wasn't there enough. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I can't change the past, but I wanted tonight to be a step forward. Clearly, I misjudged that too. Emily shifted uncomfortably, her arms uncrossing slightly. Michael looked away. Even Sophie seemed unsure what to do, glancing between us like she'd stumbled into a play with no script. Diane, who had been silent all evening, finally spoke. Maybe everyone just needs to take a breath, she said gently. This is still family. Maybe we can find a way to... She trailed off when no one responded. I sat back down slowly, suddenly tired. You know, I said, my voice quiet now, when you were little, Christmas used to mean something to us. Remember those mornings? Emily, you'd wake me up at 5 a.m., dragging Michael by the arm because you wanted to see what Santa brought. Michael, you'd rip through wrapping paper like a tornado, and your mom would make pancakes while I made hot cocoa. Those were the best moments of my life. Emily's eyes softened just a little, but she didn't speak. Michael stared at the table. I guess I thought we could find some of that again tonight, I continued. But maybe that's gone. Maybe I've been holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore. No one corrected me. No one said, "No, Dad, we can get it back." They just sat there, silent, letting the words settle into the quiet like dust. Finally, Emily stood. "We should go," she said, grabbing her coat. James followed, murmuring thanks for dinner. Michael stood too, stuffing the car keys into his pocket. "Thanks for the car, Dad," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. Sophie offered me a quick Merry Christmas before following him out. And then they were gone. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the Christmas music still playing on low. I stood there, alone in the wreckage of what I'd hoped would be a perfect evening. Diane walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Robert," she said softly. I shook my head. "Don't, Diane, I need a minute." She nodded and quietly left with her husband, leaving me standing in the middle of the room. I looked around at the table, half-empty glasses, plates with food barely touched, a folded check lying forgotten on the coffee table. The tree lights blinked cheerfully, mocking the hollow quiet in the room. I sank into a chair, my hands over my face. For the first time in years, I felt something I didn't even know I'd been holding back. Not anger, not frustration, but grief. Grief for the family we used to be. And yet, deep down, something else stirred a strange clarity. For years, I had been holding everything together with money and effort, trying to patch holes without looking at the foundation. Tonight had ripped away all the illusions. And maybe, just maybe, that was what I needed to finally change. The morning light cut through the curtains like thin blades, sharp and cold. I woke later than usual, the kind of heavy sleep that doesn't come from rest, but from emotional exhaustion. For a moment, I didn't even remember what day it was. Then I turned my head and saw the living room from where I sat on the couch all night, and everything came back in one crushing wave. The dining table was still set, though most of it had been cleared by Diane before she left. Plates and half-filled glasses sat like abandoned monuments of a failed truce. The folded check Emily had thrown aside was still lying on the coffee table, next to a small ribbon from Michael's gift box. I walked into the kitchen, my feet heavy, and poured myself a cup of coffee from the pot I'd set up the night before. It was cold now, bitter and stale, but I didn't bother reheating it. I sat at the counter and stared at nothing for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. In the past, Christmas mornings were chaos. Emily would run down the stairs in her pajamas, screaming, "Wake up, Dad! Santa came!" Michael would stumble behind her, rubbing his eyes but grinning like he already knew he was about to get something great. My wife, back then we were still together, would make pancakes shaped like snowmen, and I'd brew hot chocolate while Bing Crosby played in the background. The kids would sit on the floor surrounded by wrapping paper, laughing and hugging me for every gift, no matter how small. Those mornings felt warm. They felt like life. And now, it was just me, alone in a too-quiet house, staring into a coffee cup as if it might have answers. I stood and walked to the living room, looking at the tree. It still glowed softly, a stubborn reminder that at least one thing in the house still believed in Christmas. Beneath it, a few wrapped presents remained untouched, small things I'd bought for Emily and Michael, not expensive, just thoughtful. Emily's was a framed photo of the three of us from the year she graduated college. Michael's was a baseball glove similar to the one he had as a kid, the one he used until the leather cracked. I had imagined giving those to them after dessert, as a warm surprise, a way to say, I remember who we were, and I want that back. But I never got the chance. I sat on the couch and picked up the framed photo, turning it over in my hands. It was taken on a summer day, the three of us standing on a dock, smiling like we had everything we needed. Looking at that picture now felt like looking at strangers. I tried to tell myself last night wasn't my fault. They'd been unkind, dismissive, ungrateful. But another voice in my head whispered, "You built this. You raised them this way." The truth stung. I had spent years chasing success, telling myself it was for them. Bigger house, better schools, vacations that cost more than my parents made in a year. But I hadn't been there. I hadn't seen Emily's first heartbreak because I was in Tokyo closing a deal. I missed Michael's championship game because of a last-minute client dinner. I told myself they'd forgive me when they saw the life I'd given them, but now I realized that forgiveness had never come and maybe never would. I took a deep breath and grabbed a pen and paper from the drawer. For once, I didn't open my laptop or type into my phone. This needed to be real, not another email they'd skim and ignore. Dear Emily and Michael, last night was hard, harder than I expected. I wanted that dinner to be a step toward healing, but I see now that I've been trying to fix something with money that was never about money. I missed too much. I tried to make up for it by providing things, by writing checks and paying bills, when what you needed was a father who was present, not just supportive in name only. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness tonight or tomorrow. I'm writing this because I'm done pretending we're okay when we're not. I'm done pretending that writing another check will close the gap between us. It won't. Only honesty can do that. From today forward, I won't be giving money or gifts just to fill silence. If you need something, we can talk, like people who care about each other, not like strangers in a transaction. I'm willing to work for our relationship, but only if you are too. I love you both, and I'm sorry I didn't show it the right way for so long. Dad. When I finished, my hand ached from writing, but it felt good real in a way I hadn't felt in years. I folded the letter and set it on the coffee table next to Emily's check and Michael's ribbon. Then I grabbed my phone and texted them both. There's a letter for you at the house. Please read it when you're ready. I didn't expect a response right away, and I didn't get one. The rest of the morning passed quietly. I cleaned the table, packed leftovers, and took down a few of the decorations. The act felt symbolic, like I was stripping away the illusion I had built for one night. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired, but also oddly clear-headed. By noon, I decided I wouldn't spend the rest of the day alone sulking. I called a couple of old friends, people who had stuck by me not for what I could give them, but for who I was. They invited me to join their Christmas gathering. A simple lunch, no big gifts, just conversation and laughter. For the first time in a long time, I said yes. When I left the house, I paused on the porch. The snow from last night had settled thick and even, covering every imperfection in a soft white layer. For a brief moment, it felt like a metaphor, a reminder that even broken things can look beautiful under the right conditions. I locked the door, stepped into the crisp winter air, and whispered to myself, no more patchwork fixes. It's time to build something real. 1 week later, the house looked different. Not because I had redecorated or bought new furniture, but because something in me had changed and it seemed to change everything around me. The lights on the tree glowed softer now, not as a desperate attempt to recapture the past, but simply as a gentle reminder that it was still the holiday season, still worth celebrating in some form. I had mailed the letter I'd written to Emily and Michael, slipping it into their stockings before they came by 2 days after Christmas to pick up the gifts I'd left behind. I didn't see them, didn't hear from them, but I knew they had taken the letter. Whether they read it or not, I couldn't control. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to control it. Instead, I focused on something I hadn't done in far too long, my own life. On New Year's Eve, I hosted another dinner. Not for family this time, but for friends. People who had been with me during my worst days, who never cared about my bank account, who never measured my worth by what I could give them. I cooked again, but it felt lighter, easier, almost joyful. There were no fancy checks tucked into boxes, no car keys disguised as surprises, just simple, thoughtful gifts. A handmade scarf I'd learned to knit for Diane, a framed photo for an old college friend, a bottle of wine for my neighbor who had always shoveled my driveway when I was away. For the first time in years, I laughed at my own table. Halfway through that evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Dad, we read your letter. We need time, but thank you for being honest. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, always here when you're ready. I didn't expect more, and I didn't need more. It was a crack in the wall, small, but real. Michael's reply came a day later. Thanks for the car. Sorry for how I acted. I want to talk soon. I smiled. It wasn't reconciliation yet, but it was movement, something I hadn't felt in years. A different kind of Christmas. The following weekend, I invited a smaller group, over just 3 close friends. No pressure, no family politics. We cooked together, played old jazz records, and even went for a walk in the snow after dinner. At one point, standing outside in the quiet white glow, one friend said, "You seem lighter, Robert, happier." And I was. I thought about the old version of myself, the man who tried to fix every relationship with money, who thought success was measured in square footage and expensive gifts. That man was gone now, not because of one dramatic fight, but because that Christmas dinner had stripped away every illusion I'd been clinging to. I finally understood something I should have learned years ago. Money buys comfort, but it doesn't buy connection. You can't swipe a credit card for forgiveness, and you can't deposit love into someone's life the way you deposit cash into their account. For years, I'd thought being a good provider was enough. But now, for the first time, I was learning to be present not with gifts, but with time, patience, and honesty. A small but powerful change. A few days after that second dinner, I took down the Christmas decorations. It was the first time I hadn't done it with a heavy heart. Usually it felt like saying goodbye to something magical. This time, it felt like making space for something new. On the mantle, I left one thing up. A single photo from that Christmas morning years ago, Emily and Michael as kids, sitting on the floor surrounded by wrapping paper, smiling with pure joy. I didn't leave it there as a reminder of what I'd lost, but as a promise of what I could still rebuild, one step at a time. Before bed that night, I sat down with a blank notebook, the kind I used to fill with business ideas and financial plans. This time, I wrote something else. What do I want life to feel like a year from now? The answers came slowly, but honestly. I want real conversations with my kids, even if they're short and awkward at first. I want fewer transactions and more connection. I want people at my table because they want to be there, not because they feel obligated or expect something. I want peace inside and out. When I closed the notebook, I felt lighter than I had in years. Looking out, looking forward. On the 2nd of January, I stood on the porch with a fresh cup of coffee and watched the snow fall. A family walked by 2 kids dragging sleds, laughing as their parents tried to keep up. I felt no bitterness, no envy. Instead, I smiled, truly smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had direction again. Maybe Emily and Michael would come around. Maybe they wouldn't. But either way, I would no longer try to buy love or beg for attention. I would show up honestly and let that be enough. I whispered to myself, here's to a new kind of Christmas. And for once, the words didn't feel like a desperate prayer. They felt like a beginning.